Hi, everybody. Joe Cioffi here, weather in 5 days and 5 minutes. And we're at the beginning of what looks like a rather busy stretch of weather over the next 7 or 8 days. So we'll start with what's right in front of us, and that is a winter storm, and it's impacting the Appalachians and then northeastward into the northern mid Atlantic states and on up into New England. We have winter storm warnings up for much of Massachusetts, Connecticut, the Hudson Valley down to northern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, south central Pennsylvania into Maryland, West Virginia, parts of eastern Kentucky. Westernmost Virginia is on the border of those winter storm warnings, and we also have a few winter storm warnings that are up for the mountains in western North Carolina and winter weather advisories surrounding that. We've got winter storm watches up for southern New Hampshire and coastal Maine, and we have alerts for cold weather in the Ohio Valley down into the southeast, and also that standout blue that you see in the Dakotas and into northern Minnesota is an extreme cold weather advisory that is up. So other winter storm warnings and winter storm watches in northeastern New Mexico, northwest Texas, southeast Colorado, and also up in north central Colorado, where we have a little storm system in play there. In the meantime, as we check out the satellite loop this evening, we're seeing a weather front that is moving on through. Actually, you can pick out two boundaries here if we look closely. We have the first front that is moving offshore, but the southern part of this front is going to be stalling out. It already is. And then we have a second front and upper trough, and that's with Arctic air, and that is going to be moving eastward. Already, we're starting to see Arctic air spreading down into the northern plains and into the western Great Lakes, and that's going to continue to spread southward through the plain states and then through the deep south as we move through Sunday and Monday, and eventually into the East Coast as we go into Monday and Tuesday. So, ahead of all of this, we've got some storm systems to deal with. There's a low that's off the North Carolina coast down that is moving eastward and is a key player, by the way, in the second low that's going to develop in Alabama and Georgia later on tonight and first thing tomorrow morning. On the radar, we've got rain from southern New England southward. We've got snow up to the north and up into the St. Lawrence River Valley. Showers down into eastern North Carolina and then across southern Georgia, northern Florida, and along the Gulf Coast back to Louisiana. The leading edge of some of that Arctic air is pushing down into Oklahoma, and we've got a few streaks of snow showing up on the radar there. Weather in the west is as quiet as it can be, absolutely bone dry. When you look at what WPC, the Weather Prediction Center folks, are doing, we've got hardly any precipitation forecast from the western Great Lakes and the middle and upper Mississippi Valley all the way to the west coast, with the exception being in the Rockies. And we're talking minimal precip here, a tenth of an inch, maybe pockets of a quarter of an inch at best, and the same for the Pacific Northwest. In the east, and this comes for tomorrow in the Northeast, we've got a half to three quarters from New York City eastward to eastern New England, and then that kind of skims down the coastline. And then we get into the second storm system that we're going to be dealing with this week that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. Half to three quarters of an inch from uh, southeastern Texas eastward along the Gulf Coast. And that a lot of that is going to be in the form of ice and snow. And some of that snow is going to push up northward into the southern half of Mississippi, the southern half of Alabama and Georgia. So another round of deep south winter, as you may want to call it. So let's go first things first, and that is what's going on in the eastern part of the United States. And we're again looking at a low that is moving off the East Coast. Now, for the last number of weeks, we've seen five storm systems, two of them minor, three of them more important or major, and they've all basically taken tracks from west to east. And the Atlantic Ocean jet stream flow has been a west to east flow. It gets into that flow, and the storms just fly off to the east. They do not move northward. They don't have to. There's nothing to push them northward. Well, Now we're getting some traffic in the Atlantic in the form of a low, and you can see it here on the GFS later on tonight, sitting out in the Atlantic. And here's going to the beginnings of our storm system for Sunday. With this low sitting out in the Atlantic and just kind of moving slowly eastward, it opens up the door for this system to climb up the East Coast. It can't go it really can't go eastward because that low is there. So it's going to go take a path of least resistance, and that is to turn it northward. Now, some of the models in the last couple of days were picking it pretty far northward and close to the coast, but since then, with that ocean low still there, it's forcing it to go a little bit more to the southeast, and therefore we're getting a colder solution. So you start to see snow develop during tomorrow morning and into tomorrow afternoon from Kentucky and eastern Tennessee northeastward into Pennsylvania. This is at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. You're seeing measurable precipitation, not the radar echoes. The lows in eastern North Carolina. We've got rain in eastern North Carolina and South Carolina and offshore with a front down to Florida. And then the low goes northeast offshore and far enough offshore that it starts to allow Arctic air to move in on the backside. Not the bitter cold air, which is still going to come on Monday and Monday night, Tuesday, and lasting into Wednesday. But the leading edge of that Arctic air mass gets involved, and we see snow from northeast Virginia all the way up into southeastern New England, and that includes many of the coastal areas. The low will move away. It's a fast mover. It will not be a big snow producer, but it will do its job in about 6 to 8 hours of probably putting down in maximum amounts of 5 to maybe 8 inches, with lesser amounts in the warmer areas along the coast. And then in comes the bitter cold Arctic air. Now we have the second storm, and you see it there in the western Gulf of Mexico, and you see snow breaking out. So we're talking along the Texas coast, Corpus Christi, snow in San Antonio, snow in Houston, accumulating snow in Houston, and maybe even into New Orleans. That low is going to get suppressed to the south and east. It may be a little bit overdone in terms of the suppression, so I think we may see some snow reach up into coastal South and North Carolina before that moves out, and that'll be along about Wednesday. And then late in the week, we have a trough that's swinging through the Midwest down through the lower Mississippi Valley, and that's going to force a storm to develop east of the Florida coast. This is going to be a coastal, an intensifying coastal low that's going to come up the coast Thursday night and Friday, and that could bring some, perhaps some accumulating snows for areas close to the coast from northeast Virginia, from eastern Virginia up to about New York City and Long Island, maybe southernmost New England and southeastern New England come Thursday night into Friday. So that's going to be one we're going to be watching rather closely. It's coming in an environment of very, very cold air. So if this storm does have impact for many areas in the mid-Atlantic, the coastal mid-Atlantic and coastal Northeast, it's going to wind up being snow or nothing. Nothing if it goes out further to the east. But again, a lot happening. Now, as far as snow accumulations are concerned, we'll take a ride here on the digital forecast and we'll start up in Maine, where we're looking at generally 5 to 9 or 10 inches in some of the higher amounts that you see being indicated in parts of central Maine. We're looking at mostly 6 to 8 inch snowfall amounts from southern Vermont and New Hampshire across Massachusetts, northern Rhode Island, back through Connecticut, the Hudson Valley, north to south, northern New Jersey, uh, areas in eastern Pennsylvania, as well as south central Pennsylvania, down to just northwest of Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. Those cities are running right along the 4 inch line, would go a little bit higher. And then further south into the Appalachians, we're seeing in the western North Carolina mountains some areas of snow of 6 inches or more. And surrounding all that, where there are advisories, we're talking about less than 6 inches, and in some cases, it gets down to a coating to an inch near coastal areas and in places farther to the south. It's a little early to start looking at how much is going to fall. This is ending Sunday. This is the forecast that's ending to 7 a.m. on Tuesday, and the Weather Services offices are already putting coating to an inch across Texas, and you can see San Antonio and Houston getting involved now. this is just at the beginning of the development here. So when we look at this tomorrow, we're probably going to see higher numbers, and we're going to see the snow area being extended further and further to the east. So a lot of wintertime weather. Oh, and we should probably look at temperatures. And I'm going to put up minimum temperatures here, and we'll take a look. And this is Tuesday morning. And with the added snow cover, it is probably going to shave off a few extra degrees on the low temperatures. We're looking at single digits in southeastern, southern New England, down through New Jersey, and even in areas down into Maryland and Virginia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, all getting down to single digits. And we've got below single digit, below zero readings in parts of upstate New York. As we move west into the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes, we're seeing a lot of areas showing single digit lows. And then you get into the really bitter air, the double digit lows, below zero lows in Iowa, in Wisconsin, 20 or more degrees below zero across Minnesota and into north and eastern parts of North and South Dakota. So this is a very, very cold air mass indeed, and it's covering a huge area of the United States. You've got double digit below zero readings all the way back to the Rockies. So it's pretty much from the Rockies to the East Coast, the deep South in the 20s and teens. Pretty cold for them. It's been colder, but the single digits kind of stay out of the way, at least for the time being, except maybe in the mountains of North Georgia and northern Alabama, and then on up into the Appalachians. So very, very cold air indeed is spreading throughout much of the U.S. except for the western part of the United States. There's no Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, but there will be a Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll probably even talk about the Eagles Rams game tomorrow because it is being played in Philadelphia and they're going to be playing with snow falling. So that should be fun to watch. So we'll see you tomorrow night on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time.